Let's get started. So I wanted to talk to you guys today about consumer products and how consumer is actually eating all software, including enterprise. And what do I mean by that? So this obviously has to do with the fact that AI models have made the average consumer so much more powerful, right? Most professional level capabilities are now accessible to an average unprofessional, I don't mean that in a demeaning way, but an average consumer. And that's exciting. So a little bit of quick background about myself before we jump into the details and how I think about the space. I am a longtime AI founder. I built up Rosebud AI, which is right now a vibe coding platform to help people make games. Why does that give me any authority to speak about this? Well, first of all, I've shipped multiple AI products, at least 5, on the frontier. And that means I've built AI apps on AI models that were basically just released from research or kind of even in research and has never been productionized. I came into the space back in 2018 when we were pre-LLM, so pre-ChatGPT, pre any of the language models and the magic that language models has given us. And this is like in the early days of AI when we were generating really interesting just like images. And from then on, because my PhD was in AI from Berkeley, I had the conviction that not only will the research of this type of space get a lot better, because I kind of see where that trajectory was going, but also the implications for me as a average creator. What do I mean by that? I'm not a trained artist. And I think a lot of artists creative people don't need to be trained, but they have this impulse to create. I think what I saw really early, even back in 2018, is that these tools that could be built using frontier AI models will empower a general audience creator, somebody who wasn't trained in using Adobe or to paint, or wasn't trained for a long time to be a musician, to be able to indulge in creativity. And so I think that has proven to be the right conviction, because the success of AI tools and AI in general has been to make much more accessible a lot of professional things. Look at the success early days of Midjourney, right? Midjourney, by any measure, was a very UI, UX, very simple product. You would go into Discord, type /imagine, and then describe something, and then out comes an image. But because of its simplicity and because of the wow factor of what was being generated, despite the controversy, you cannot deny that that was a magical experience for the average consumer who might have had some inkling in their imagination of what they want to create, and then out came this wonderfully detailed, aesthetically pleasing image. That magical moment has been basically experienced in a myriad of other verticals. ChatGPT, why did it have its moment, right? Because you could literally just type anything in natural language, the most accessible. Natural language is like, you don't need to be a professional to be able to speak. If you can speak the language, you can ask a question, you can demand something, you can query. People are very used to using natural language to ask questions. And from that, they realized that this very powerful frontier model, back then was GPT-3, was able to basically answer the question in just such an interesting, such unexpected ways. It's able to create poetry. It's like the whole fat tails of possibilities was a magical experience. So again, now we use ChatGPT and also other frontier models from Anthropic, Gemini to do coding, to automate workflows, to do all these traditionally professional asks, but the real magic was in that consumer moment when an average consumer was able to ask it stuff and get back an incredibly intelligent answer that surprised them. So very similar to the Midjourney moment. And so all of this is to characterize what I believe is essential to prioritize and focus on and hold as incredibly important for an AI founder or anybody building AI product for that matter, which is the consumer experience has to be magical. And so even if you are building for other businesses, for professionals, for the enterprise, what you need to focus on is to bring that same magical consumer delight. That is what Midjourney gave its the first user moment of Midjourney, the first user moment of ChatGPT. That is the level at which you have to compete with, the level of magic. So let's start our first chapter of this, which is where do I get these consumer insights? Like, what is a delightful consumer product? Early days of Rosebud, I actually tried to do some enterprise. And then, let's hold on a second while I fix this fucking sound. So loud. I don't understand why it's so loud. Let's check if this recording is even working. Oh, fuck that. Let's just continue. Well, actually, we cannot fuck that and continue because it would be really fucking sad if it's not working. It looks like it's working. Let's continue. So let's talk about my experience in consumer land. I stumbled on it because back in 2019, basically, when I started building Rosebud, I realized that the models are far from perfect, right? The best models were GANs. If you remember what they were, these models that are not even diffusion models, but they were based on, or rather, let's talk about the applications. They were very good at generating a domain on which they were trained on. So for instance, faces. You train on only face images, you're able to generate a really cool face. Train on trees, you can generate trees, etc. So I realized that these models were really, if you can cherry pick a good example, looked great, but they were really far from perfect in terms of any kind of enterprise application. And when I talked to enterprises or large companies, large brands about using my AI generated images for professional use cases, it was just this long, laborious process, as any enterprise sales is to satisfy all these concerns that might not have to do with the potential of the model. So I was like, oh, this will take way too long. Models will get better, but I don't know how long, 2 years, 10 years, who knows. But consumers, I think they are the ones who will be able to test really quickly. And I've seen viral moments back then, even within my small bubble of the research community, releasing certain types of models and being like, oh, this is so cool. CycleGAN, I can transfer style from one image to another. Looks really janky, very pixelated, but still, that was the base case for your imagination to think about how much more cool this could be. So then very quickly that moved to, let's launch stuff in mobile apps. Because 2018, I think mobile was getting saturated, but not so saturated yet that you can't go viral with some cleverness. Yes, you can do that now, but back then it was still very charming days of being able to go super viral with no marketing spend, and also just the earliest time for AI. So some of the stuff that I really tried to do was create, photo editing experiences that leveraged AI models. So released a couple of apps. My second one went viral, took some learnings, and one, it was called Talking Heads. It basically animated faces that were images, and then it was able to animate it and make it lip sync. Very early days. Now remember 2020, it was basically one of the first, if not the first app to do this. Got 2 million downloads in about a month, actually in 2 weeks. Zero marketing spend. I was very proud of myself. There was a viral loop inherent in it. Okay, so why do I bring this up? Mobile is it's like to learn about how to design a delightful consumer experience. Because if you do not design something that is delightful to use and that is easy to use, intuitive to use, it's over for you. You think of what the mobile user, an average mobile user, is doing, right? They're like, the image I always have in my mind, it's obviously not the case for everyone, but like the image I always have in my mind is somebody sitting on their toilet and they are just using your app, and if it sucks, they will just like do something else. They don't read. Like, I never want to read when I use a new app, so just don't assume people read. And every millisecond is sacred. So like, do not assume that people will give you extra time to understand what's going on. Like, the UI should be, the image I love to keep in my mind is like horse blinders, a really guided experience using your app. Because if I have to look around and be like, what's going on? What are all these dials? Then you've lost me. So defaults, having a one click, that's very obvious that you should be clicking here. I mean, really forced to like take through a flow, click that one great experience, aha moment. Okay, not all apps obviously are that simple. So you're like, what am I talking about? Obviously, AI, you can get far more complicated, more dials are introduced. Like, look at Midjourney prompts, they're so crazy. Sure, yes. But the first time somebody experiences an app, you need to convince them that it's worth their time. You need to convince them that it's worth their time to, time with the app to master it. And you don't do that by hitting them with 1,000 dials and make it look like, Adobe, but like Adobe or like Ableton. Like, people do not spend time to master this tool because they don't have to. It's a consumer app. So mobile was the crucible in which I learned, how the bar needs to be in order to drive a delightful, simple, deeply intuitive consumer experience. And I hold myself to that standard. And I honestly think it's just so hard to a really delightful consumer experience. So I'm always like feeling but it's not perfect in that regard. And that's fine. I think it's always going to be a struggle, because the fun part about product design is that when you have such a new, new AI capabilities, they're multimodal, it's super smart, you're trying to understand where the model is good and bad. You also want to design for how to like surface the right knobs and dials to the user, right level of control without overwhelming, right first experience, but still hints at like mastery they can go through. So that is really the delight of designing in this day and age AI products. But the thing, if you take anything from me for the YouTube session, is think about mobile, think about how sacred every millisecond is, and don't overwhelm the user. The first try should be delightful, and it should be as magical as the first time you've used Midjourney or ChatGPT. Okay, so point I wanted to really get to is like, what does this mean? Like, why was this essential, even if you're not designing a consumer product? And it's because, so powerful that most professional use cases should lend itself to a delightful experience. People can do more. Intended as a developer tool, people use it who are not developers. Why? Because it's so powerful, because the input is natural language. Even if you open up a terminal, it can, because of the simplicity of what the terminal gives you access to in terms of exposing the raw power of the model. But it doesn't mean that somebody has to be a developer to use it. And so this will become more and more true as time goes by. Next 6 months, 1 year, next 2 years, models will be more and more powerful, and type of professional enterprise product should fall into the same, to be in the same type of like delightful standard as a wildly successful consumer app. Okay, so that means for AI builders is to not assume people read and to design a really good experience. And this also focuses your understanding of the model too, right? Like it's a deep understanding of where the models are expected to improve, to really have a future-proof design and expectation of how the product, for a average consumer experience to be very powerful. Okay. I want to close off talking about why this is also very powerful for building moat in AI products. So, not something that startups even have to worry about, but also, one of the most interesting things about building AI products today is like, it's not about startups against big companies. It's about like everyone feels the world is shifting under feet, safe, whether you're OpenAI or Google or Anthropic or like Cursor or even like startups like us. And it's because these models move so fast, and it commoditized on every level, right? People used to make fun of the fact that companies are rappers. Okay, so now you open source models like Kimi and DeepSeek that rival, certainly surpass, in Llama's case, some models trained by incredibly large labs with a wealth of resources. Okay, so it's an interesting times. Everything's shifting, and so as a result, people are trying to move fast and they're trying to be future proof, and then have to figure out how to develop moat in a way that protects them, at time as well. And it's not just about like, oh, for the sake of, but like what, just an interesting intellectual exercise. So I will argue that focusing on developing these like delightful experiences, that is what can generate viral moments, whether it's something's consumer or B2B. And that also helps you get a very special, unique set of user data to actually train new models. And so it becomes like a very powerful moat developing tool. The product ends up giving you the power to train your own models, because open source models are good enough to be fine-tuned, or even you can have like scratch. This I will all go into detail in another for these YouTube sessions, and look forward to that one. Yeah, so I look forward to going into detail in future session. But right now it's like, if you are an AI founder, or if you are somebody designing product in AI, just because you're not in consumer does not mean you have the privilege of not making a delightful consumer experience. So do that, and I think you'll not only win in terms of create a product that people like to use, but I think it's going to be incredibly foundational for also driving moat and also creating user data you can train on. And so it'll be exciting to chat about in the next one. All right, bye.